Aditi, can you? So I'll start with the introduction of our guest. Priyanka Paul is a developmental professional hailing from Assam. She has been working on comprehensive contraceptive care with Ipas Development Foundation for 3 years. She is a member of Orikalankini 2020 Adult Fellowship cohort. She is also running a campaign called Hreetu Renewing Time that aims to promote period positivity with Indigenous stories. So, Priyanka ma'am, shall I begin this interview?
Sure, Manish. Thank you so much for the introduction. And I will just add on a bit to it. I'm not a member of Orikalankini, but I'm a fellow that I did my fellowship. I was a part of the fellowship cohort of 2020. So yeah, you can call me a member because I'm always like very much in connection or involved with Orikalankini. But you know like as a fellow, I was there as a fellow, and I keep on involving with Oni Kadankini in in their work wherever I get a chance to do so, and it's a pleasure for me to be a part of Ori Kadankini. Yeah, so that was something I just wanted to add on.
All
Thank you,
right.
Manish.
Sorry for that. Okay, so starting with the Ritu Renewing Time, the name itself has a very good meaning, I guess. So, what sparked the idea behind this name, and what motivated you to start archiving the stories around it and form an organization?
Mhm. Yeah, thanks for the question. Actually, when we ask about the name and the meaning and how I came into the idea of the name and the the initiative, I'll say, so it actually brings a lot of memory and the whole the process to my mind as well. So Ritu actually in Assam is as you have already introduced, I'm somebody from Assam, and my work is so much connected to Assam. And in Assamese, we call menstruation Ritu Shrab. Okay, so and then in menstrual cycle, menstruators to go through seasons. We have 4 phases in the whole cycle, and that is compared to 4 different seasons. So season is also called in Assamese Ritu, and menstruation is also called Ritu Shrub. So from that, I thought about the name Ritu that came into my mind, and renewing time, like evolving with time and adopting new ideas and welcoming new ideas, and of course taking the ancient ideas along with. That was the whole idea of the name behind Ritu Renewing Time. Yeah.
And ma'am, what exactly motivated you to start this organization by archiving the stories of indigenous people?
Yeah, sure. So, the whole idea or the whole thing started somewhere with my personal experiences. So, I have to narrate or share my story here. If I talk about how Ritu took birth, actually, when I had my first period, I can completely remember that I just knew that like when I just encountered with my period, I knew that it's my period blood, but I didn't have the courage to go to someone or to my parents or to tell them that I'm having my periods or I had my first period or I'm bleeding. I didn't know because I never had this conversation with my family. But with some of my classmates, I just knew that because they already had it, so I knew that it's period, but I didn't have the guts or the no, I was not that much like comfortable to talk about it. Then, like, so when if I remember that the day when I had my period, I kept quiet for the whole day. I had it in the morning. It was a weekend. I was studying, and I kept quiet for the whole day. And then somehow by afternoon, like evening, I had to tell it to somebody, and I went to my mother and I told her. And I don't know, surprisingly, I saw tears in her eyes, and I mean, it was an horrible experience. I don't know how do I say it. When I saw her crying, I it made me more anxious. So, you know, but when we talk about menstruation in Assam, there are like menstruation is also celebrated in Assam. Like people have puberty marriage ceremonies, functions to celebrate the first period. So, but I'm from a Bengali family uh, from Assam. So I had these both experiences. Kind like in my family, we have the rituals and all these practices, but we don't have the ceremonial part. But in my friends or in my neighborhoods, I have seen that like they have the same practices, but at the end of the day, they celebrate it too. So it was always a curiosity for me to know how they felt about it. Were they anxious like I was, and were they comfortable while there was the ceremony celebrating, or I mean how the practices have been for them. So that query was in within me always there. And like it was with time I realized that the menstrual practice I was going through or whatever I was practicing, when I like started working in the field, I realized like practice, I just felt that I was living in some denial. I didn't know what I was doing actually. And that was a point for me to start working in menstruation. I felt like the need, like there are so many people, so many menstruators like me who are going through the same anxiety probably. And that is true for a, you know, for a natural biological process. And it becomes like a horrible experience. And there where I felt the need of working in it. And yeah, exploring the stories of indigenous people or different tribes were, because I wanted to understand their experiences, their perspective, their practices they are doing, and what it brings to them. Like, do they go through the same experiences, or how it is different from people to people. So it was somewhere my experiences, my own curiosity, and the need I felt of understanding people, the other menstruators, the fellow menstruators. That was the whole idea where I started exploring the menstrual rituals or stories among different tribes of Assam. Thank you.
This archiving of the stories, I have a personal interest in this. I love listening to stories. So, next question from my co-host, Aditi.
Yeah, thanks.
Before asking this question, I would really like to give a huge clap to you because you turned a bad experience of yours into such a big help for so many people, and prevented to have some people go through what you went through. So you're a great, amazing inspiration for that.
Thank you so much. Say,
So while researching about your entire campaign, I discovered that you do some podcasts and you talk about the period myths and taboos and everything related to period societies and movements
hmm,
and everything in that category. So I also
hmm,
noticed that most of these podcasts were not in Hindi or English. So
hmm.
I can't personally understand those. So how do you plan to expand this, and why do you um, mean choose podcasts as a medium?
Right, right. Yeah. So first of all, I would like to answer why podcast. Like when I just felt no that we can like I came across through some amazing stories. I must say, like so many like difference of experiences, so many stories, and it was not only about the myths and stigmas. My whole idea was to understand how the practices are what are the practices, what is the perspective of the community on regard to those practices, and what have been the experiences of the menstruators. So that was the whole idea, how they feel about it. So actually I didn't want to have my no my own, I didn't want to go with my own ideas or with my own notion. I was more curious to understand from their experiences and their perspective. So these stories or the podcast not only includes I mean, it is not very much directed to understanding like the stigmas or the myths, but the whole practices and the belief of the community. And then what I feel is my whole idea was to bring the discussion in like among people, and so that they can decide or they can understand from those stories and the perspectives, and they can decide what they want to follow and what they don't want to follow, uh, other than directing something. So that was the overall idea behind it. And I chose podcast because I somewhere feel that like I wanted to have a, a tool which is not limited to a portion of people who can only uh, to whom reading is accessible, who can read, or who to whom like the social media platform, if you say, or some reading material is accessible to. If you see, if I generate some reading material which is equally important, but then I just felt that there will be one portion of people who are probably studying or reading is not accessible to them, and they will be they will not have that bunch of information. That was the reason I wanted to have some like I actually planned for some audio visual tool, but for now it's the audio tool only, the podcast. Probably I will think about that in future. But so that people can listen to the podcast and they can understand from by listening to it. And because you know there are so many materials, like people are doing a lot. So many menstrual educators, they are doing some amazing work. I must say Alharh is also one of them, who are creating some amazing materials so that people can read them and get some information from them. But I wanted to have something so that people who cannot read, they can also get the information by listening to it, and that is why podcast is. And of course it's in your another question, like it's in Assamese. The reason is that I wanted to reach out to more people from like who are I wanted to go to grassroots of Assam, like people of living in rural pockets of Assam, so that the language doesn't come as a barrier to them. And that was the reason I wanted to create more content. If you go to Ritu's page also, you will see that I make it a point. I like I'm trying to create more information or more material in Assamese along with English or other languages. So the reason is that I want to reach out to people like who are living in different areas of Assam, for whom maybe English or in that case probably Hindi too is, who are not very comfortable with other languages. Maybe Assamese will be more accessible for them, and that was the reason why I made it in Assamese. And then I am also planning to reach out to some community radio centers so that it can actually go to different places and different rural areas and communities of Assam. So that is why the whole reason is that um, of no behind making it in Assamese. Yeah. And I hope I have answered to your question, Aditi.
Yes, you
Or
did. I'm very satisfied with the answer, and you're very keen with spreading period positivity in Assam, I see, and that leads to me to my next question, and that is, how period positive is Assam in general? Like, how easy do you find it to spark up a conversation about period positivity or the entire topic of menstruation in general there?
hmm so yeah, it's I mean, if we say in general, it's it's very different from areas to areas, from places to places. But and again, I have worked with a with a certain kind of communities or certain group of people. So in that case, it's a bit difficult to comment on the whole community as well, or the whole Assam as well. But yet I would say, like as I have said, like in Assam there is a practice of celebrating periods. Of course, along with that, there are different practices which are prevalent, which are like the purity pollution idea of purity pollution is completely there with these practices or this celebration as well. But the celebration part, or the part that actually people when they celebrate, they talk it, they do not hide it, they talk it aloud. So that in that way it becomes a bit easier from to start the conversation from there, from those practices itself. So like no talking about the celebration part, or talking about the celebration, understanding the celebration and the practices, that actually opens a point of discussion, and that way it becomes bit easier with the community to discuss about their own practices and the rituals, and then to go in different layers of it. But again, it varies from community to community and places to places. There are like it's not that everybody in Assam celebrate, or all the communities or socio-cultural group living in Assam celebrates menstruation. That's not the case. And also, like celebration is a part, as I said. Along with the celebration, there are some practices which are existing with the celebration. So when we talk about the other things, it obviously becomes somewhere difficult to carry out the discussion or to proceed with those discussions. But I just find it no the discussion point for me, uh, because from I would like to say from my experiences, which is not again not the same for everybody. But if I say from my experiences, if we start from practices and how they follow the things, if you go with the open mind and discuss, try to understand from them and start the discussion from there, it gives us a point to discuss and go more deeper into it. So again, there are nuances, like it's bit difficult to have a general idea, or generalizing the thing. Yeah.
That is a very valid point. Now, I would like to pass it over to Munish Bhaiya again, and he'll be asking you some questions.
So while doing all this, talking to various people, listening to their stories, I'm sure that you must have gained experience of knowing indigenous communities and their views on menstruation. So can we know about their views on menstruation and how it is different from non-indigenous society?
Mhm. Yeah. Thanks, Munish, for the question. There was a very interesting point actually that came out. Like, I want, I wanted to understand their practices and the rituals they follow during their first period. And interestingly, I came to know like most of tribal group of people, or most of these communities, they do not, they didn't have any such kind of practices related to menstruation. They didn't have the rituals, they didn't have such practices. For few of these tribal groups, I would say, like I did the study. I carried out the study among 8 tribal groups, and among those 8 tribes, like many of them, they didn't have any period related rituals or any practices in earlier times. But what happened while living with like a non-tribal group of people, they as a result of coexistence, they have now started following the rituals. They have started practicing some period rituals. So for an example, many of the as I have said, like in Assam people do celebrate menstruation, the first period. But for this group of people, like they didn't have any such celebration. It was a normal thing for them. There was no practice, no rituals, no celebration, and nothing. It was like any other day. But what happened when they are living with the non-tribal people, when they saw like these people are celebrating periods, so they are going through some practices, so they tried to know why they are doing this. And the whole idea is that they are doing this for the well-being of the menstruator and the family. So that is the reason they have also adapted it. They have adapted these practices or the rituals that thinking about the well-being of, again the same thing, the well-being of the menstruator and their families. So that was an interesting point that came out. I have I have came across. While they didn't have any practices, while they didn't have, it was a any it was for them for any like any other normal days. But with time, while living together as a result of coexistence or cultural assimilation, now they have adapted these rituals. Now they are actually practicing it, which was not there originally. And which was like, no, so it was for me also, it was a different feeling. Like I just felt like when they, it was a normal thing for them. There was no nothing exactly like the formation of culture. Yeah. So while like for them it was a normal thing, right? There was no rituals, nothing. They just, they accepted it as a part of your growing age, their growing age. But exactly like the cultural formation, we can say now they have adapted it. And when they have adapted these practices, with that the whole idea of purity pollution also came into their life. So that is, and that is something I found out, which was uh, that gave me, that opened my eyes in in many ways actually. And practices are different, I would say, yeah. But still there are the tribal groups who do not follow such, I mean, rigid practices, I would say. Like in some of the, it varies from areas to areas, from people to people. I have seen it varies. If I say of a particular tribe, or say any tribe, like people living in different areas with though originally, as I said, there was no such practice, but with time now different people are following different practice. Some of them are living as they were living earlier, they do not follow such practices. But some, as a result of coexistence, who are more linked with the non-tribal population, they are following the practices. So it is such.
Oh, that's a nice response. Also, I found a very good thing while researching about your organization, that you seem to be working on a book. So, what
Yes.
can we expect from the book, and when can we see it up for sale?
Okay, so yeah, thanks Munish for bringing about the book. So like the book is still going on. I'm still working on the book. And like what we expect from the book is the whole journey I had throughout this exploration, or throughout this, I while I was exploring the stories. Yeah, with this book I do not want to bring like a kind of an idea what is wrong or what is right. My whole intention is to bring out what is the community's idea, what is their perspective, what is their practice, and why they are following it. And so I have interviewed with different group of people, like with elders and with adolescents or young people. With elders, my idea was mostly to understand how the practices had been in their time, and what is their belief. And with adults or young people, I tried to understand what is their experiences with these practices. So I just I'm trying to bring out that point, like what are the practices, and what is the perspective of the community. And as an outsider, somehow we tend to give our own judgment. I personally feel like, because something is, I do not like or I do not appreciate something, it doesn't mean what I am thinking about their idea is the right or the correct idea. Right. So it is more to understand. I'm trying to bring out their perspective and their experiences, how they feel about it, and the reason behind it is to bring out the ancient practices and the current practices, and mostly so that people talk about their own culture, their own rituals, and throughout that, like while talking about this discussion, it is a scope where we can bring out menstruation in discussion, because that is something we do not generally talk about. And before we start working, it is very important, I feel, to talk about menstruation. When we talk, then only we can intervene, right? So I just want to bring the discussion on menstruation, the discourses of menstruation in discussion, and so that, like, with an open shell, that people can go through it, people can understand their idea, and then they can decide for themselves, like they, so that they can have a bunch of information and they can take an informed decision. So that is the idea, yeah, I'm trying to bring in.
Also, a personal question which has been uh, from me since a long time. Can we expect the stories you have learned from the indigenous societies in different languages?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that I completely have an intention to do that. Actually, for the podcast also, it's in Assamese, but I do want more people, like, yeah, I have said, like, answered earlier that I no, I made it in Assamese so that people can or people from different areas of Assam can relate to it or understand it. But at the same time, I also want these stories to go to different parts of the no, I don't. I don't want to have a limit. Like, I don't want language to be a barrier, so that some other people or people who do not relate, who are not aware of Assamese or who do not cannot relate to Assamese language, do not understand it. So I do not want to have that barrier. So definitely there is an intention. I do want to, like, do not the podcast exactly, but I do want to bring out the stories in different languages. Yeah.
That's a
And I
win-win
would
situation
also,
for me.
thank you so much. And I would also love to help, like, have help of wonderful people like you, like, to translate it or probably to do it, because yeah, that will be a great help for me as well.
Sure, sure. I
I
would
have
love to contribute.
discussed, thank you. Actually, many a times I have discussed this to Shalini as well, that I want to do this. Like, I want this information to go out in different languages so that more people can get the information. And there are some amazing, amazing stories, I must say. Thank you, Shalini.
Okay, so we are at the end. I'll pass the last question to Aditi.
Thanks, Manish. Bhaiya. You mentioned that you look to Alharh for period resources and knowledge about periods in general. So, what are some things that you find unique about Alharh, and what are some places that you think that need some room for improvement?
Mhm. So, first of all, I would like to mention that involvement of people in Alharh, like like young people like you who are coming forward and taking the charge. If not, and the amazing thing is that it's not that, like, you are only working behind it, but you are coming forward and you are taking the equal stake in it. So part of this platform and you are equally involved in it. So, uh, just to hold all her team for that. And of course, I remember very clearly Shalini once mentioning the idea behind the name Alharh, and how this she said like Alharh is bachpan. So how you are taking the whole idea of knowing or having the information on menstruation or experiencing menstruation, and your work with in the schools with children especially is something I really feel is very important, because that is the time when they encounter it, when the whole roller coaster happens. So, and I really think that is the most important part of life, when we should actually give the information. And yeah, very recently when there are some crisis situation, emergency situation, I have been following how Alharh is Alharh has been equally, you know, actively involved in community in those situations. So that was something I really appreciate, that we took you took those challenging situations, but still you didn't stop and you continued to work. So yeah, cheers for that. And yeah, you said about improving. I won't say improving, but what I would like to see more is probably, you know, with the children. I would also, with time, I would also like Alharh to see expanding and taking this work more to the involving the teachers or the parents as well. So that is something I want in future to see more. Yeah, along with the involving the children, I would also like to see involving the parents and the teachers, the people who immediately influences their experiences.
That is a very important point, actually. I am noting this down, and Shalini Dee is also noting this down. Thank you so much for that. And this conversation has been so insightful, and I think we all enjoyed all of your points, and it was so nice. You were so eloquent with everything. I loved how you spoke so passionately about Assam and how much you want to spread period positivity there. And more power to you. Please keep doing what you do. You are truly an
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aditi. It's a pleasure to hear that and to be here. Yeah, thank you so much.
Priyanka, I would like to just give you a disclaimer. मेरा कोई हाथ नहीं था सवाल लिखने में. So if you think that the question about the book had something to do with me, it didn't.
Okay.
Aditi and Munish researched all the questions, and we kind of brought up the questions to you as and how they liked it. So thank you so much for making time for this conversation today. And I hope जो हमारा pending conversation है वो भी जल्दी हो. And just want to point out, I think in terms of your work, I think your campaign, according to me, is doing one of the most creative parts of the work, documenting Indigenous stories, because I haven't heard that being done before. And so it becomes even more crucial that, we also get to hear those podcasts you're recording and the book that you're writing. And I just hope that we really help you reach out to more people with your work. Thank you so much, Aditi and Munish, for doing this and moderating this wonderful conversation. And thank you everyone else for joining in and supporting. Thank you again, Priyanka.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shalini, for for giving me this like your platform to talk about the work I'm trying to do. And thank you so much to Aditi and Munish to come up with this wonderful question. Like, well, Shalini said that like you found, like you did all the research and came out with the questions. So it gives me like, okay, there are people who are actually probably going through the work and they are knowing the work or trying there's something the work is doing. So thank you so much. That gives me a good feeling as well. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
Good night. Good night.